NOSFERATU. It's a film that has been out for some time now. It's definitely got a lot of buzz, a lot of controversy. We're going to talk about the divisiveness of this film and where we stand with the divisiveness. Because who knows, maybe we're team loving this film because it's from an amazing director, or we're a team hating this film because we feel like it's overrated. Joining me today, I have Crystal, which is the perfect person for this film because she's the number one horror fan I ever knew. So what's your thoughts? I want to hear yours before I get into mine.
Um, I think it's like a pretty objectively good film. I think it's like if we're talking about just the actual filmmaking involved, like it's very tight. Like the story is very well paced. There's incredible cinematography, like really visually stunning shots. That being said, well, actually, I'm gonna go back to like the visually stunning shots, and I'm gonna
Mhm.
go back to some of the good stuff. The sound design was really good. As it comes to horror films, like sound design is so important, and I think it was really solid for this one. There was like, I don't know if you could hear it, but like throughout the film, there's always this like sound of breathing, and that's like
Mm.
either Nosferatu's breathing or it's Ellen's breathing.
Hmm.
So that was kind of interesting. That kind of like lends to the overall dread of the film. And then, so I mentioned cinematography. There are really striking shots in the film where
Hmm.
I'm like, "Whoa, how did he get that? He's so great."
Hmm.
That was like a little inconsistent in other parts because I remember there was a scene by the beach that's like actually a classic scene from the Nosferatu like lore and films.
Hmm.
And like for a whole like chunk of it, I didn't even know they were at a beach. The lighting was kind of weird and
That
like
is
it
true.
wasn't a very like dynamic shot to look at. I thought they were just walking on the bank of some like random forest or river or something.
Hmm.
But that's me nitpicking because I love Robert Eggers,
Hmm.
and he's made some of my favorite horror films for sure. And I kind of like didn't have to restructure my tier list because weirdly enough, this film is like probably like dead last as far as like my order of like Robert Eggers films.
Ooh.
And not because it's like bad or anything. I just like personally, I just remember where I was like all the times that I watched his other films, and they have like all of them rewatchability for me. And for some reason, this one, I don't know, maybe I was tired or something like that. But I was like, I don't know when I'm gonna want to watch this one again. I just don't know. And like that's like the only thing that's really like my main judge of like putting it last. But it's still a very good film. He's still got like an insane lineup of films under his belt. But those are my initial thoughts. I feel like I still have trouble like articulating some of my
Hmm.
feelings with it, but hopefully we can nail it down while we talk.
For sure, for
How
sure.
about you?
Okay. Yeah, I have so many mixed thoughts with this film. I think so. For starters, number one, this is probably the first film I've seen of him. I've never got the chance to see all his
Mhm.
other films, but I know he always has Willem Dafoe, so I'm gonna have to watch more of his film because I feel like Dafoe really was the thing that caught me in this film. But for me, I really wanted to love this film, and I was loving it until we got to that third act, and it was when they reveal the drive on why she accepted this monster. And my thing is like I'm not against, because there's always been this thing with, you know, I guess you can say romance with a monster kind of thing. There's always been that kind of thing within horror films and
Yeah,
stuff
for
like that.
sure.
And I
Oh
have
yeah, like
nothing.
even King Kong and Swamp Thing, it's
Yeah,
very
exactly.
classic.
Very classic. And
Yeah.
I'm not against it at all. I think that, if it's done right, it's able for me to like, I can feel for it. But here it came off very superficial. It came off almost like I feel like this girl had a kink, especially because for me it detracted everything that happened before. Because first I'm thinking, oh my god, she's screaming because she's being possessed, all this stuff. Now I'm thinking, oh, she's just having multiple orgasms, and this monster is just laying some fetish there. And then to me, what made it even worse was the fact that even her husband later on, after the reveal, he's all like, oh great, this monster's giving my wife a bunch of orgasms, now I gotta go in. And it's just like, at that point it ruined
Yeah.
it for me, especially because the acting and everything else before that was very good. Like I was really immersed with it. I was like, oh
Yeah.
my god, this is scary, this is horrifying, like everything's get
Yeah.
to it. But then once we get to that part, it just
Hmm.
I no longer cared. I was just like, yeah, let the girl die. To the point that literally there was I think the last scene or one of the scenes where they get to the where they're trying to find the body, right? And then they realize that they were tricking
Mhm.
him. And then
Mhm.
the husband is all like, "You're gonna let a virtuous woman die?" And Will Dafoe's character is like, "Virtuous? Your woman just had sex with a monster. Like, what's virtuous about that?" And I laughed, dying in the
Mhm.
theater to the point that people were like, "Shh, be quiet." And I'm just like, what do you mean, guys? This is a ridiculous story to begin with. So it's just like, I lost it at that point, and I think for me that kind of killed the film. Like, I don't think it's because I can't call it a bad film. I can't say it's bad. It's great. It's
Mhm.
well executed. It's talented, but that literally took me out of it. Like, it's to me, it's more disappointing than
Mhm.
bad. I'll say that for me. So that's where I stand on
I
it.
get it. I think it's one of those things because Eggers is all about authenticity of the time period. He doesn't like to hold the audience's hand and he doesn't like to apply a modern lens to his film. So this is one that I feel like I kind of get where you're coming from, where I also struggled to like, oh, do I you really have to like understand the context of like Nosferatu and like vampire lore to like really get into the story and like even begin to kind of dissect and understand the motivations of the character. So, I mean, just on the surface level, like if we're thinking about the history of vampire media, it is fetish media. Think about the
Hmm.
first person who ever wrote about a vampire. It's like dubious consent, it's non-consent, right? So
Hmm.
if we're thinking about the time when it was created, which was like Victorian times, and you can see it in the costumes too. Everyone's like buttoned up, like put together.
Yeah.
Even if you're like a little bit crazy or weird, people are gonna judge you. And so like when Nosferatu came out, like, obviously people were horrified, but like think about the evolution of vampire media and how we went from like Nosferatu, like a ugly bucktooth, like,
Yeah.
weird looking guy, and now it's like the most popular form of media for like young girls and teen girls, and now like vampires are sexy. So like obviously it comes from a place of like, yeah, like someone somewhere back then in Victoria times was like a freakazoid, and people like young girls, maybe young boys, whatever, can like attach themselves to it. And that's why there's like a lot of people that like love vampire media, and like some people that are like, yeah, I love this like Nosferatu freaky stuff. And like,
Yeah.
I was like, he was like kind of gross, but I do have like hear me outs of my own, but like, yeah, they definitely made Nosferatu look pretty like crazy in this one.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely something you have to this film think about the context of the time period, because it's like it's about, yeah, like sexual deviancy and shame, and like she I think in the story definitely like loved whatever his name was,
Uh,
Nicholas Holt's character.
I think it's Hunter.
Yeah, she loved. So Nosferatu is basically Dracula, so he's like the
Yeah.
Jonathan Harker character. He's like Keanu Reeves.
Yeah.
But she like obviously loves him, so the story is like, oh, like you can love someone but you can still be like kind of a freak, and like maybe
Yeah.
like your lover can't deliver on like everything you want, and like how do we like deal with like sex in society. But
Yeah.
like, yeah, I think if you're not if you don't like know that context, it's like the story is definitely like weird. To me, it was actually like a little boring because
Mm.
because like look at all this like, oh like, crap I know about this kind of media. And like there were some moments where I was like, I wish this was like directed by a girl or something. But uh and no, I still really like Robert Eggers, but this reaction that I had to it, I think was kind of I had a similar reaction to his film The Witch, but The Witch is
Interesting.
very good. I think it's better than this one.
Okay, for sure.
Where you have to consider the context, because that one is also very similar, dealing with like themes of womanhood, women like
Mm.
turning into adults, and like um I don't know, in that time period that The Witch was set,
Mm.
like it was a very similar thing where like everything was very buttoned up. People were like so bored and depressed with their lives that they were like going crazy, and like young women were suffering. Um, but like, and that's context that was like easier to pick up and like apply to the film. And then have like a little bit more like sympathy for the character. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think this was like an interesting reattempt to like do a similar story. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, like after, and I feel like that's like the worst thing I could say about a film is like if it's like a little boring. Like I want to be entertained. Like
Dang.
even I've get yeah, like even like bad films like Trap, I'll be like, yeah, you gotta watch this because I was like entertained. So I don't know, something about Nosferatu just like dragged for me in some moments, and that's like my main gripe.
Yeah, I definitely
And I
agree
think
with
that's
you.
why I put it last. Yeah.
Because
Like
like
so mhm.
even for me, like there were scenes, granted, I think because I mean, I drank a lot, so I had to pee, right? So there's moments
Mhm.
where I would leave, went to pee, and then I'll come back and I'd be like, wow, they're still in the same area. Like I was
Same,
like,
same.
like they would
Yeah.
be like nothing really changed. So it's like, so there were moments like that happened
Yeah.
in the film. So it did drag
Yeah.
in, but I think for me, like you said, I guess for me, I was able to appreciate the atmosphere and the aesthetic a lot, and that really, especially the cinematography, which
Hmm.
I'm surprised you were calling it boring.
Yeah.
Because for me, maybe it's because I didn't really watch the original. So maybe if I watched the original, maybe I would see a more of a contrast. But I was able to appreciate it, like visually, I was able to appreciate it a lot. Like I was able to be like, oh, okay, it caught me immersed for her. But for the most part, yeah, a lot of people, they were bored. Like a lot of people, I hear that was a big criticism
Hmm.
that this was too much of a slow burn for
Yeah.
them. So,
It's and that's I hate to say it, that's literally the worst thing I can say about not just horror films, but like any films. And you know me, I love horror. Like I wanted to be scared, and I
mhm,
wasn't scared. And like, oh my gosh, The Witch and The Lighthouse, I was like scared out of my mind. Like
mm,
those movies were really like crazy to me. And they had like endings that stuck with me that I like
mhm.
thought about as I left the theater. This one, not so much. I was like, okay, that's that. And I went to sleep. But for like, but The Witch and The Lighthouse stuck with me. The Lighthouse is my top
Mhm.
Robert Eggers film. I think that one is like really fun because of the aspect ratio and it's in black and white. And it's I don't know, some parts of it I feel like are like groundbreaking to me. Um this nothing groundbreaking about Nosferatu, like,
Mm.
and yeah, and it's just like I feel like my gripes are different from others people's gripes. I feel like people that are like fans of horror have different gripes than like the general audience. I think the general
Yeah,
audience is not used to seeing like possession performances, so I feel like
exactly.
people aren't taking that like they're not like reacting to that with sincerity. They're kind of just like laughing at it. And like I feel like that's like the wrong gripe to have because I thought the
Yeah,
performances were like the strongest part of the film.
yeah, me too. And again, I wouldn't be laughing at it if I didn't know it was just her having multiple orgasms. I would have just thought it was just like, oh
Yeah.
my God, this was actual possessions. But now it recontextualized it as
Yeah.
that. It's like, okay, so it kind of
Yeah.
ruins that aspect for me. But that's very interesting.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. So I'm curious because people are saying this is the best horror film of 2024. What would you like? How many horror films would you say are above this from 2024?
Oh man. And it's funny that you say that because like there's been a lot of like there's been some great horror films this year,
Hmm.
and before this everyone was saying that like, oh, what was it? There was another film that everyone was saying was like the best horror film of 2024. Let me get this real quick.
Is it
Let me
Terrifier?
research. No, but I'm sure there's some people that think that's the best one of all time. Yeah,
Terrifier 3.
there's a film, Long Legs, by newcomer Osgood Perkins, and they were like, "This is the scariest, like, worst horror film of the year." And like, I was underwhelmed by that one, and I think I had a similar reaction to this one. And like, just because like there was a lot of good horror this year, none of it was groundbreaking, but it's like as a horror fan, like, um, I just have my personal tastes and I know like what entertains me in films.
Hmm.
And so I feel like a lot of like some of the more notable like horror films from this year I thought were like you mentioned like the new Terrifier, even though I don't think it was better than Terrifier 2. The Smile sequel, even though I also don't think that one was better than Smile 1. I
Hmm.
think those were like really notable, entertaining horror films from this
Yeah.
year that I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just like I feel like when people say like, "Oh, this is the best horror film of all time," it's because people like think they want to see like elevated horror or like and I don't know, like it falls into this trap of like people always trying to like redefine horror and make it like something new, but like not always succeeding. But I don't know. Like, and I think that this Nosferatu kind of like falls into that trap too, because I would consider like Eggers's filmmaking to be like elevated horror for sure.
Hmm.
Um, and but like but it's always been like quite good, you know? Like it's always actually been like quite scary and like the tension is always palpable. It was just less so in this one for some reason, which is crazy because I think it's like one of his most like probably his biggest commercial success. So
Really?
like if anything, I just hope people like go, yeah, I think so. Like I would assume more people watch this one than The Witch. And
That's
like you
fair.
said, you haven't seen any of his other films, right?
Yeah.
I think it like there was some kind of viral marketing, and I think because the cast too was an incredible ensemble. There's like a bunch of like, you know, young bucks that people like and
That's fair.
classics like Willem Dafoe. So I think
Yeah.
those drew crowds in, like the
Yeah.
ensemble.
Hmm.
Um, and it's still a very good film. I'm nitpicking, but I do
Yeah.
encourage like you and anybody else who's interested in horror to visit his other films. And I didn't mention it, but he made a film, The Northman, which is not a horror. I mean,
Hmm.
some parts are kind of scary, but like it's an adventure. It's like a Nordic version of Hamlet, or it's like
Yeah.
the original Hamlet.
Hmm.
Incredible film, bombed at the box office.
Dang.
But I would rank that one above Nosferatu also.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, because like it's movies like this why I can't take horror seriously. It's like it's stuff like that
Hmm.
where you have something like this where it's built up to be something great or real to be talented, but then it gets too over campy. And
Hmm.
the thing about this, especially for this film, is that I feel like it had the potential because like again, I'm not okay, I'm totally fine with that being like an outcome or being a like they want to show that you know humanity that there's a certain side of humanity that people are uncomfortable and shame. Totally fine with them expressing that and having manifested in a monster. I just wish again it was done in a way where you can understand the pain, you understand maybe this girl felt very lonely, you understand that this guy maybe felt a little bit deprived, and then this was like this is the curse of mankind when a monster like takes your insecurities and stuff. Because I know that, again, this movie is kind of religious, right? So you can almost say she made a deal with the devil, and then the devil gives you consequences. So I'm okay with them going that narrative. But again, and that's just my thing with horror. It's like horror will always have these elements to it, and it's hard to find a movie that does these story beats like properly. And as someone who appreciates the narrative and appreciate
Hmm.
people making
Yeah.
decisions like basically driven to make decisions in a way that's reasonable. Like it's hard to have that. And for me,
Yeah.
the only horror movie that's done that for me, ironically, was Get Out. Like Get Out, even though it's not really, I guess, a horror movie, but at the same
It
time,
is. It is.
okay,
It's hard horror. Yeah, Get
for
Out is a
sure,
horror
for
film.
sure. Which
That's a good example. Yeah, and it comes down to execution. It's funny that you say like some things are you like Nosferatu is overly campy when Get Out is like
it
way
is,
campier
but
than
I think it's like,
Nosferatu.
but I think the thing is
But
that
I think what you're saying is like Nosferatu is like I don't want to say anything is unintentional because I feel like Robert Eggers is a very intentional filmmaker, but I
Mhm.
think some parts come off unintentionally campy in this
Exactly,
one.
exactly.
I think I like camp in horror films, but I like to see it leaned into. I like to see that
Yeah,
it's like intentional, and
exactly.
I can always tell when it's intentional. Not everyone can, and that, you know, that can like impede enjoyment, but I can tell you that like I don't think there was anything that's supposed to be like intentionally like super campy in this one. I mean, there are
Ex-
horror elements, but I don't think there are classic horror elements, but I don't think that should be synonymous with camp. There may be an argument can be made for it, but I don't think
mhm.
so for this one.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with that. And that goes back to even going with Get Out, because Get Out, again, it was also a comedy. So it's like they leaned
Yeah.
into this stuff like
Yeah.
that. So
And like yeah, the horror campiness was definitely like intentional on you could tell like Jordan Peele is like a huge horror fan. And I think that's the biggest thing is like for horror fans like it really feels great watching a horror film from a director that you can tell they watch horror films and that they like horror films. And
Mm.
you can tell that with things like Get Out for sure. That's why sometimes elevated horror for me, that's my biggest issue is like, they you know, directors will try to like get away from that and separate themselves from the genre. Sometimes it's very cool and successful, other times not so much.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. I mean, do you have any more thoughts? Any last thoughts? Or
Um, I don't know. I mean, I still enjoyed it. I think I'm still gonna be excited for whatever his next project is, as long as it's some like crazy new time period. Because I think that's where he shines is when he can get real technical with like the set design, which he did, and the costumes. I think the costumes was like one of my favorite things from this film.
yeah, that's what
Best
I heard.
costumes I've seen in a film in a long, long time. That's nothing to sneeze at. Sound design, incredible. I love good sound design in a film. Um, and yeah, I mean, yeah, that was my only note is like sometimes I was getting a little bored because it's hard to reinvent the wheel. It's all
Mhm.
cracks in the pavement with vampire media and horror. Um, but yeah, I don't think another director could have done it better.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he gave it a good go, and there's a lot of people that love it. So
Yeah.
I think it's gonna do fine, and he's gonna do fine, and I'm excited to see whatever Robert Eggers' next project is.
Yeah, I will definitely say this got me more curious. And again, it got me
Yes.
talking about it, right?
Yeah,
So,
watch his other films, I implore.
yeah. So, yeah, it definitely got me talking about it. Now I have to worry about Nosferatu because he's Mr. Steal Your Girl. So, just
He's Mr. Steal Your
so
Girl.
we all gotta be worried for that. But yeah, let us know down in the comments what you thought about this film. Were you on the side that you love this movie or this movie just pissed you off? Because it's just a really interesting movie. But
Or are you just in the middle, just floating along like me?
but yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.
Peace.